In my defense, you've seen over 3,000 movies and you have a very good understanding of the types of movies you like, so my options were limited for this one. But your four favorites are Paprika, Brazil, Forbidden Zone, and The Happiness of the Katakuris. It seems like you're into movies about dreams or movies that feel like a dream or a nightmare. And I'm not just saying that because your four favorites are bizarre and trippy. It's in your bio and you have multiple lists about it. But you didn't have dreams marked as watched. It might not be as surreal as some of the other dream movies you love, but it was inspired by actual recurring dreams Akira Kurosawa experienced, so I think it's fascinating. Since one of your lists is titled Reality Plus, and it looks like you've been watching a lot of short films lately, I want to recommend a short film titled Reality Plus. Some other movies that deal with dreams that I think you might like are Open Your Eyes, Wild Strawberries, and On Body and Soul. Two of my favorite dream sequences of all time are in Spellbound and Long Day's Journey into Night. I wanted to recommend some animated films since you like Paprika, and I think Fantastic Planet would fit in well with your favorites. In addition to having Paprika in your favorites, there's a claymation sequence in The Happiness of the Katakuris, and one of the other animated films I thought of is Mary and Max, which is stop motion. Another animated film I wanted to recommend is It's Such a Beautiful Day, not only because it's one of my favorite films of all time, but it's very surreal and has some very dark humor, which are qualities I noticed in your favorite movies. Forbidden Zone and The Happiness of the Katakuris are the weirdest musicals I've ever seen, so I wanted to recommend some other weird musicals. Donkey Skin is pretty weird and funny. All That Jazz is also a musical, but it's not really weird, but it has a fantasy element to it that results in some dreamlike, surreal scenes, so I think you might like it. It's also just one of the greatest movies ever made. I always forget it's a musical because it doesn't come to mind when I think of musicals. It comes to mind when I think of the best movies of all time. I know I've recommended The Trial to at least one other person who had Brazil in their favorites, and I'm doing it again. I feel like if you Google movies similar to Brazil, it probably won't come up because it's not part of the same genres, but it just feels right. The Coconuts is a musical comedy, and you have two of those in your favorites, and this movie is in Brazil. I know The Zero Theorem didn't get great reviews, but in a way, it sort of feels like a spiritual sequel to Brazil. The last time someone had The Happiness of the Katakuris in their favorite, I mentioned how it was a loose remake of The Quiet Family, and I think both are worth watching, so I'm recommending it again. Since Forbidden Zone is such an absurd film, actually all of your favorites are kind of absurd in some way, you might also enjoy Holy Motors, Rubber, Love Exposure, Phantom of Liberty, Society, and Kinds of Kindness.